Alright guys, I got a video for you today. I got a request on how we made the super chunks. So I'm going to talk to you about what we made them with, how we made them, and then give you some details on the particular challenges and some technical methods. Alright, so these are 47-inch tall, and that's because the ceiling's 95 inches and I needed room when we put the batting later. So each of these legs is 47 inches. I already gave the measurements in the second part video. These are about 31.5 inches across, and then they're 22.5 inches deep. This is made from John Mansville R19, so it's 6 inches thick, and it's separated by this tie wire. It's in the ground rod section, past the lumber, the last section at Lowe's, and it was about $6 or so, and I had to go through 2 rolls of it to get all 9 super chunks separated at every layer. And I put that here and the top, the bottom, then in between each one. So I already showed you how I cut the 23-inch squares in half, which gave us the 31.5 inch face or whatever it is, because the super chunks, the wedges, the acoustic wedges have to be a little smaller than the frames. So again, in part 2, I showed you the exact dimensions. So if you just cut your 23-inch insulation in half or in diagonally, you're gonna get the exact same thing I have. I glued some Kraft paper on the extreme top and then again at the extreme bottom, because that's where the 3-point corners are. That's where the base accumulates, and in the center where I'm either sitting or standing, I'm going to have that high and mid frequency reflection. That's going to give me a little bit more of a less ambient sound there. But when I put the paper on, I just glued it on yesterday, it really tightens up the low end. So when we do the ceiling, I'm going to balance out the Kraft paper and the unfaced bats to give the perfect balance between base absorption and mid and high frequency absorption. So if you have a look down here, you'll be able to see the fabric super chunk, and it has the batting in there. We've sewn that in. So what we did was we bought some of this. It's 48 inches wide. I don't know how thick it is. It's not super thick. And we cut that into strips. So these are 48-inch strips, and they're a little higher. So we just end up gluing it with. We glued it with this E6000, and this is about $5 a tube. And once you get a little more skilled, you shouldn't need a whole tube per super chunk. But we glued that on because, again, over here, let's go back. These wires stick out some. These frames end up not being completely straight because the centerpiece, and we had to use these garden stakes, which have a 45-degree angle on them, and also we just drilled through the metal on these 90-degree angles. Some of the tools that we used were a hand drill. I have a Ryobi hand drill with an 1/8-inch bit on it, and that was really a pain. It took a really long time. You have to force the drill in there while holding it straight, and it was really a pain. So I recently picked up this, they call grid punch. It has an 1/8-inch little chisel tip on there, and then it'll poke through the drywall bead, no problem. And of course I'm using 1 1/4 inch drywall bead. In the last video I talked about the lengths that I used to get the job done. Another thing that's helpful is the T-square. I didn't actually use this a ton, but it is good to have around. You'll need these yellow handled metal shears, a rivet gun, and of course several hundred rivets. So that covers the materials we used. Now we're going to go into a little detail about exactly how I made the triangles and use the rivets to construct these frames. Alright guys, so here I want to give you a close-up detail about how I constructed these triangles, because obviously the legs are pretty simple. The legs are connected to the triangles, so if you can figure out how to make the triangles, you'll be able to figure out how to make the legs. Obviously a triangle has 3 sides, But when you get this drywall bead, imagine that this is an 8-foot piece, or a 10-foot piece. They're not going to fit because of the corners. So we know that we want the front side to be roughly 31.5 inches. Again, reference last video. And we want these sides to be 21 or whatever. So I actually did use this measuring tape here. So let's just measure this first one out to 3 inches if we can. And we'll measure these, and we'll measure this 1F. So we know that that's the face. And it's important to measure these because if you have pre-measured these and they're all fitting together and all of a sudden you just toss them into a pile, you might start getting different ones that you didn't cut properly. So now these are going to be the sides. So I'm going to label them 1S and 1S. I don't think that it'll matter which side is which. And here this one's going to be 2 inches. And draw a little arrow if you need to, so you know which side is 2 inches. These are just the remnants I had left over from the cuts. And then you're going to take your metal shears and just cut on the dots. The dots are a really good indicator of where to line it up. I mean, you do want it pretty exact. And then you just twist it and it just comes apart. Same thing with this side. Then we got our arrow so we know which is which. And then your face. I don't actually cut your face. Okay, so you're going to want to open them up a little bit so they're more of a 90-degree angle. Same thing goes with the big pieces. This really isn't that much different. And then, so now still you have this, actually you want the two sides to make them the right angle, and then you want this one to have the 45. So naturally, those fit together perfectly, and this one doesn't. So what you got to do is cut just a perfect diagonal from here to there. You eventually, if you do enough of them, you'll know exactly how many dots that is. I think it's 8 or so. So you end up with this, and then you have these pieces that need to come off also. This is why you do test fitting, because if you cut the wrong side, you're going to be in bad shape. So now you have this piece all centered together. You can see that this would be your top. Just everything it would be separated out more. So anyway, you have your face, you have your two sides, you have your face, And then what happens is you want to get them to stick together. So you're going to have to make 2 rivets here, 2 rivets here, and 2 rivets there. Obviously this is kind of small.
Rotate it because I couldn't see it.
Yeah. This is a miniature version, but this is how the pieces fit together. And you want to make 2 rivets for each joint. Now this is really small, so I'll see what I can do, but... So this is my first time trying it with this hole puncher, but you just got to figure which side is going to be which, you know? So if this side's going to, because again, you have to construct the 90-degree angle first. So it would make sense that you punch your holes in this one first. I realize that there's already holes inside of there's already holes in the metal, but they don't all fit the rivets. So here, what you'll do is take a marker, make sure your piece is lined up, poke your hole in the next piece in the exact spots. If you need to, you can adjust this. Let's see. Make sure this piece doesn't get in the way. So now we should have 2 holes that line up. So you're gonna go 1, 2, drop that piece out. And see, I did it backwards. So for future reference, get both your rivet pieces in the holes first. Otherwise, it moves. But anyway, we got it in there. This is going to be the right way to do it. But that's a good example of the wrong way because it really looks kind of shitty. And then there you go. You get that nice crisp mushroom top. And again, if this was a full-size piece, you would actually know that since this is the 90-degree angle, you're just going to have those 2. But over here, if it was a bigger piece, you would do 2 on each of these joints. But since we're really low on space, and since I did it backwards, we can just do the same thing over there. But again, because this is miniature, these holes are like over. But this is a good example because sometimes you might punch a hole and it'll be over the hole of another piece like that. So you might have to punch more than 1 hole or even drill more than 1 hole. But in any case, let's just pretend that this is correct. Put our little mark. Punch a hole there. Line the 2 pieces up. And then again, we know now, yeah, you got to put the little nipple in the hole. use the stem, pump it once, twice, and again you will just do the two. I know it looks all fucked up, but you might end up with some not perfect edges, but it doesn't really matter. You know, get it as close as you can, and this is pretty much how you'll make the triangles. Alright guys, welcome to the fabric part of this video. We are using unbleached muslin on these panels, which is super cheap. It was $2 a yard, 33 inches across. Again, since these panels are 31.5 inches in the frame, the fabric, you know, gives you just a little bit extra, and the fabric is cut to 60-inch lengths, which is maybe a little much for the 47-inch panel, but that's what we used on the rectangular 4-inch thick panels, and that barely worked. So just for the sake of consistency, I think we cut them to 58 inches. So whatever you do, and you'll see that you'll have a little extra. And then the batting here is glued to the frame just on one side. So here's the insulation, here's where we glued that batting, which I showed you earlier, and then the other side is unglued. But you'll notice that the holes are pretty even, and that's because I poked holes in between the pre-made holes. You can see the wires going through the pre-made holes, and then you have an extra one here, an extra one here, and that's going to give us a more even edge. And then there's a little bunching, but that gets pretty much straightened out once all four sides are accounted for, as I showed you in the earlier part of this video. So Carla's with me here, and again, make sure you have thread that matches the color of your fabric. This thread in real life looks like it doesn't match. It actually looks darker in this room, but at the store it looked a lot lighter than I imagined the muslin to be. So, you know, either bring a little sample with you, or, you know, go with a slightly lighter shade than you think your fabric is. In either case, this thread is never going to show. So Carla's going to show you right here how to thread the needle. We don't expect acoustics enthusiasts to know how to do this. So you can see she's pulling it to her arm's length, which in her case is not a ton of thread, but you'll pull that to about an arm's length, and you see here that you have the two ends, and she'll cut that even. Twist it with her fingers a little bit, and then that's how you make your knot. It's just with a little twist. And what, Carla, why are you doing that?
Just so it doesn't go through.
Alright, and that's so it doesn't pull through when you're actually threading up your stuff. So you can see the top edge is done, that edge is done over there. Now we're working on this top side. Well, the actual top of the frame. Okay, so she's pointing out the holes here. Doesn't want to talk. And so she's folding the extra fabric underneath the batting. Oh yeah, and then what she does is she pulls the fabric between where her hand is, and then, you know, so it stays tight. Carla, show what would happen if you didn't do that. You know, it would probably start, yeah, it would start to bunch up or whatever.
Oh, the middle stuff.
Yeah, you have to make sure that you just basically keep the fabric tight. When she did the top edge first, she didn't pull anything tight, but then, you know, you gradually stretch it out, so then by the time you get to this one on the end, you end up with a nice tight finish like that. You guys, real quick, I wanted to add one detail about these frames. If you look, I use the pre-existing holes in these frames because of sheer laziness. It wasn't even laziness though. because again, drilling was really hard, and once the insulation's in, if you drill through, the drill's going to catch the insulation and spin it up, and it'll just make a mess out of your work. So you can do one of two things. Either you can get the drywall bead that has regular holes in it, or you can pre-punch your front legs, well actually all the legs, to make sure that you can get this wire even. You're not even going to see this, so it doesn't really matter that it's a little awkward in there. And you're going to have to find your own way to string up this wire. It wasn't entirely easy, but really what I did was I brought a piece in front, a piece along each edge, and then I essentially made a circle in the middle, and then adjusted that circle to the correct tautness to support these. Now, do you need to do a wire on each layer? Probably not, but in my mind, we have these rectangular rigid insulation panels, and they've lasted us 7 years now, and I think they're gonna go, of course, at least another 3. So that's 10 years that these frames, and yeah, we flipped the frames, so now we have the backs on the fronts, so we got new life out of them. There was some dents. Let me see if I can flip these around. Not on this one, but some of them did become dented because they were angled along the floor corners, and they get stepped on. So, but I really anticipated that these chunks, especially because they're out of the way, are going to last 10 years, and I don't want this insulation compressing. So, if you want to do it right, make sure that you have these wires or whatever you use. I wouldn't recommend using jute string. We did try to use that, and that was really spongy. I'd recommend some sort of metal support in there, and yeah, this stuff is going to get your hands kind of black, but again, we did every single one. I would recommend pre-punching your holes so you can get it as even, so you don't end up with this. You want something like this, and that, I think, is going to give you the best result. Okay, thanks guys. Okay guys, so you saw how we made these super chunks, what we made them with to include the materials and tools. I gave you a close-up on how we made the triangle pieces with the rivets, which side to put the rivet in. Remember, put the nipple through, so the long side is where you want the mushroom top. It's really important, especially when you start fitting these pieces together, to get that right. Measure twice, cut once. If you want to use fabric, decide if you're going to use thread or not. Again, you can use Velcro. Remember, it was the E6000 glue to get the batting around the edges. Some people like to use batting on the whole front, and that's legit. We just decided not to do that. This is the first time we've ever made super chunks, so it may or may not have been the best way, but I'll tell you, these things work. They're lightweight, and I think if you use the hole punch, it's going to be a lot easier than having used the drill. So decide where you're going to put your craft paper once they're in place, and enjoy your great sounding room. If anything wasn't clear about the frame construction, the materials that were used, or anything else, leave them in the comments below. Be sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. Thank you very much.